The market went silent the moment the chains hit the stone road. Not quiet slowly. Instantly. 1 second. Merchants were shouting prices over fresh bread and smoked meat. The next, every voice in the village disappeared beneath the sound of iron dragging across cobblestone. The orc woman walked through the center of the street without lifting her eyes once. Tall, broad-shouldered, green skin marked with fading black war paint. Her dark hair moved with the evening wind while bruises covered one side of her face. Somebody had thrown rotten vegetables at her earlier. One still clung to the chain around her wrists. Nobody stepped close. Children were pulled indoors. Shopkeepers lowered their gaze. Even the town guard looked nervous standing near her, because everyone in Thornwall had heard the rumors. They said she murdered her husband on their wedding night. They said an entire farmhouse burned after she arrived there. They said she once commanded orc soldiers who fed prisoners to wolves during the Northern Wars. And yet, she didn't look angry. That was the part that unsettled people most. She looked exhausted. At the far side of the market, the blacksmith watched silently beside his coal cart. His hands were stained with soot, his shoulders heavy from another 14-hour day at the forge. He wanted nothing to do with village politics. But the town elder suddenly pointed toward him. "You still owe winter taxes." The old man smiled cruelly. "Take the orc bride instead." Laughter spread through the crowd. The blacksmith's jaw tightened. "I'm not buying a prisoner." "She cooks," the elder said. "Probably." More laughter. The orc woman finally lifted her eyes then, calm and unreadable. The elder smirked and folded his arms. "Well," he mocked, "can you even cook? Or do your kind only eat raw meat?" A few villagers snorted. Then she spoke. Not broken human words. Not growls. Perfectly clear. "I fed 600 soldiers through a mountain siege with one wagon of grain and melted snow." The laughter died instantly. Somebody near the bakery dropped a basket. The blacksmith noticed it immediately, the fear spreading across faces in the crowd. Real fear. Older men recognizing the markings burned into the leather around her wrists. One whispered a name under his breath. The widow of Black Hollow. The blacksmith felt the air change. Then, from somewhere beyond the village gates, horses began approaching through the fog. The riders never entered the village. They stopped beyond the fog-covered tree line, barely visible beneath the dying orange light of sunset. 3 horses, black cloaks, motionless, watching. The blacksmith felt it in his chest immediately. Men who traveled like that were never merchants. Beside him, the orc woman quietly lowered her eyes again. "They found me faster than I hoped," she said. The wind pushed smoke through the empty street. Somewhere nearby, a dog started barking, then suddenly whimpered and ran. Nobody in Thornwall volunteered to help escort them home. Not one person. The blacksmith walked ahead with one hand near the hammer hanging from his belt while the chains around the orc woman scraped against the frozen road behind him. Villagers peeked through curtains as they passed. Some looked terrified. Others looked angry. But none of them looked surprised. That bothered him most. The blacksmith lived alone at the edge of Thornwall beside an old forge slowly falling apart under winter rain. The roof leaked near the furnace. Half the fence had collapsed months ago. Cold wind slipped through cracks in the walls like invisible knives. The orc woman paused outside the doorway. For a second, she simply stared at the house, not mocking it, studying it. "You can sleep in the storage room," the blacksmith muttered while unlocking her chains. "Don't make me regret this." The iron cuffs hit the floor heavily. She rubbed her wrists once but said nothing. That silence followed them everywhere. The blacksmith expected threats, rage, violence. Instead, the orc woman moved through the tiny house like someone terrified of taking up too much space. She spoke softly, ate slowly, slept with one eye open beside the cold storage wall. And sometime during the night, while heavy rain battered the roof, she repaired his broken kitchen chair. The blacksmith discovered it the next morning beside the fire pit, perfectly balanced again with fresh rope bindings pulled tight around the legs. He frowned toward the storage room. The orc woman was already awake, sharpening a knife near the window. Not aggressively, carefully, like ritual. Outside, Thornwall dragged itself into another miserable winter morning. Farmers argued over grain prices in muddy streets, while refugees from the northern roads crowded near market fires for warmth. Rumors spread faster than smoke these days. Another kingdom had collapsed east of the mountains. Trade caravans vanished constantly now. Mercenary companies controlled entire roads after sunset. And somewhere far north, surviving orc clans were still hunting each other after the war. The blacksmith tried ignoring all of it. Survival already took everything he had. But over the following days, strange things kept happening around the house. Firewood lasted longer than it should. Meals somehow stretched for days. Broken tools appeared repaired before sunrise. Once, after returning from the forge, he found the entire pantry reorganized with military precision. Dried food separated by shelf life. Water sealed against freezing. Escape supplies packed beside the door. The blacksmith stared at the arrangement uneasily. "You preparing for war?" he asked. The orc woman didn't smile. "I was taught famine arrives before soldiers." That answer stayed with him, especially later that night. The storm outside turned violent after midnight. Wind screamed through the trees while snow slammed against the windows hard enough to shake the walls. The blacksmith woke suddenly. The storage room was empty. His hand moved instantly toward the hammer beside the bed. Then he noticed the front door standing slightly open. Cold air spilled inside. He stepped outside carefully into the freezing darkness and found her sitting beside the porch, motionless beneath the snow, guarding the house. Her massive frame faced the forest while one hand rested near a hunting blade across her lap. Snow covered her shoulders completely, but she never moved. The blacksmith frowned. "You're freezing." "They track better at night," she answered quietly. Something moved deep between the trees then. A shadow, gone almost instantly. The blacksmith tightened his grip on the hammer. "Those riders." The orc woman nodded once. For the first time since arriving in Thornwall, genuine exhaustion cracked through her calm expression. Not fear for herself. Fear of what would happen if they reached the village. The blacksmith studied her silently while snow drifted across the dark road. Then he asked a question he hadn't meant to say out loud. "Why protect me?" The orc woman looked toward the distant forest. Her voice barely rose above the wind. "Because nobody protected me." And somewhere beyond the trees, a branch snapped. Winter arrived like a punishment. The river beside Thornwall froze solid within 2 nights, and hunger settled over the village faster than snow. Smoke barely rose from most chimneys in the mall. Farmers guarded grain sacks with knives in their laps. Even the church stopped ringing morning bells to save candle wax. And somehow, the blacksmith's house kept surviving. Not comfortably, but surviving. The difference bothered him more each day. He noticed it while splitting with one freezing morning. The coal reserves beside the forge should have been nearly gone by now. Instead, every sack had been stacked beneath dry canvas, protected from moisture before the storms even began. Inside the house, the fire burned slower too. Hotter, cleaner. The orc woman had adjusted the furnace airflow using broken iron scraps and clay without ever mentioning it. The blacksmith watched her quietly from across the room. "Where did you learn all this?" She kept cutting vegetables without looking up. Sieges. That single word carried enough weight to silence the room. Outside, Thornwall slowly turned against her again. Animals disappeared near the woods. Hunters returned empty-handed. And every small hardship somehow became the orc's fault. The town elder fed the fear constantly. She brought northern curses with her. He warned villagers near the market fires. First comes famine. Then comes blood. People listened because fear was easier than reason. But the blacksmith noticed something else. Every morning before sunrise, fresh tracks surrounded the property. Large wolf prints. Too many. The first attack came 3 nights later. Screaming shattered the village before dawn. The blacksmith grabbed his hammer and rushed outside into blinding snow. Villagers ran through the streets carrying lanterns while livestock tore free from broken pens in panic. Near the western gate, 3 dead sheep lay scattered across the ice. Not eaten. Killed. The hunters tracked the wolves into the forest by torchlight, but they returned hours later pale-faced and shaking. Gone. No blood trail. No bodies. Only silence. The village grew restless after that. Nobody traveled alone in the mall. Doors stayed barred after sunset. And still, every morning, the blacksmith found fresh snow disturbed outside the house. One morning, he opened the forge door and froze. 6 wolves lay dead beside the fence. Clean blade wounds across their throats. No struggle. No wasted movement. Snow covered their fur like burial cloth. The blacksmith slowly turned toward the house. The orc woman sat near the fire sharpening a skinning knife while steam rose from a pot beside her. There was dried blood across one sleeve. She didn't explain, didn't brag, didn't even look proud. "You went alone?" he asked quietly. Her hands paused for half a second. They were getting closer. That answer stayed with him the entire day, because for the first time, he realized something dangerous. The village thought she was a monster because she could kill, but she only killed things threatening others. That night, while repairing wagon wheels inside the forge, the blacksmith finally spoke again. "You could have left any time." The orc woman stared into the furnace flames. "Yes." "Why didn't you?" For a while, only the sound of crackling fire answered him. Then she spoke softly. "I was tired of running." The blacksmith looked at her differently after that. Not as a weapon, not as a burden, as someone exhausted from surviving too long alone. Days later, the storm came. Not ordinary snow, a mountain storm. The kind that swallowed roads and buried entire farms beneath ice. Visibility vanished completely by evening. Then the church bells began ringing wildly. A child was missing. The blacksmith arrived at the village square to pure chaos. Parents shouted over each other while snow hammered the rooftops hard enough to shake them. A little girl had disappeared near the northern forest while gathering firewood. Nobody wanted to search. Not in that storm. Not after dark. The town elder kept saying it was already too late. The blacksmith ignored him and grabbed a lantern. Then heavy footsteps stopped beside him. The orc woman pulled a fur cloak tighter around her shoulders while fastening a long hunting blade against her back. "You know these woods?" he asked. "No," she answered calmly, "but I know fear." The search became a nightmare almost immediately. Snow swallowed their tracks within seconds. Frozen branches clawed across their faces while the wind screamed through the trees like distant voices. Several times the blacksmith nearly lost sight of her entirely between the storm shadows. But the orc woman never hesitated. She studied broken branches, footprints beneath drifting snow, tiny clues invisible to human eyes. Then suddenly, she stopped, kneeled, touched the ground. "3 men," she said quietly. The blacksmith tightened his grip on the lantern. "How can you tell?" One limps. His stomach dropped. This wasn't an accident. They followed the trail deeper into the mountains until ancient stone ruins emerged through the storm like giant skeletons buried beneath ice. Cracked pillars leaned sideways beneath centuries of snow while torchlight flickered faintly underground. Voices echoed below. Human voices. The blacksmith peered carefully over the edge of a collapsed stairwell and felt rage hit him instantly. Children, 6 of them, bound beside wooden cages while armed smugglers argued over prices near fire. The missing girl sat among them crying silently. The blacksmith whispered, "We can't fight all of them." The orc woman's expression changed then. Not anger. Focus. Cold. Precise. Terrifying. For the first time, the blacksmith glimpsed who she used to be during the war. She pointed calmly toward the tunnels below. 3 guards. 2 archers. Leader near the cages. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Stay behind me until the lantern breaks." "What happens after that?" The orc woman slowly drew her blade. Then they stopped seeing. And deep beneath the ruins, someone suddenly screamed. The first man died before the lantern hit the ground. 1 second, the smugglers were laughing beside the fire. The next, blood sprayed across ancient stone walls as the orc woman burst from the darkness like something the mountain itself had unleashed. The blacksmith barely saw the blade move. A body collapsed beside the cages. Children screamed. Then the lantern shattered. Darkness swallowed the ruins instantly. Only firelight remained. And inside that flickering orange glow, the orc woman became terrifying. Not wild. Controlled. Every movement precise enough to feel unnatural. An archer loosed an arrow toward her shadow. She stepped sideways before the bowstring even finished snapping. The arrow struck stone while her blade buried itself beneath the man's ribs a heartbeat later. The second smuggler tried grabbing one of the children as a shield. The blacksmith moved first. His hammer crashed into the man's jaw with a sound like breaking wood. Teeth scattered across the floor while the cage keys slid beneath the fire pit. The blacksmith stared down at the unconscious slaver, breathing hard. He had never hit someone like that before. And somewhere deep inside him, Something old woke up. "Get the children out," the orc woman shouted. More footsteps echoed through the tunnels below. Too many. The smugglers weren't alone. The blacksmith grabbed the cage keys while smoke rolled across the underground chamber. Children cried in panic as he forced open frozen locks one after another. "Hurry!" A little girl clung tightly to his coat. "They said they were taking us south." His stomach tightened. Slavers, not random kidnappers. Organized. The orc woman suddenly seized the blacksmith's shoulder and dragged him sideways just as the spears slammed into the wall behind his head. 3 armed men rushed down the tunnel entrance. Then 4 more appeared behind them. The smugglers had reinforcements. The orc woman stepped between the attackers and the children without hesitation. Firelight reflected across her green skin while snow melted slowly from her dark hair. One of the men froze immediately. Recognition hit his face. "No," he whispered. "Black Hollow." Another backed away instinctively. The blacksmith looked between them in confusion. What exactly had this woman survived? The smugglers attacked anyway. Steel exploded against steel inside the ruins. The blacksmith fought brutally beside her, swinging forge hammers instead of swords. Sparks burst every time iron smashed against armor, while the cramped tunnels amplified every scream and impact. But the orc woman fought differently, like she could already see the battle ending before it happened. She used the environment constantly. Loose stones, narrow pathways, blind corners. At one point, she kicked burning coals directly into a smuggler's face before driving him backward into a collapsing pillar. The ceiling cracked instantly. "Move!" she roared. Stone thundered down behind them as the tunnel partially collapsed, separating the remaining attackers from the children. For a moment, silence returned. Only heavy breathing remained. The blacksmith stared at her across the smoke-filled chamber. She wasn't breathing hard at all. That frightened him more than the fight itself. Then distant horns echoed outside the ruins. The orc woman's expression changed immediately. "Fear. Real fear. We leave now." The children barely made it back to Thornwall before sunrise. Snow still hammered the rooftops when villagers rushed into the streets to meet them. Mothers collapsed crying as children returned wrapped in fur cloaks beside the exhausted blacksmith. But nobody looked at him for long. Their eyes stayed on the orc woman, covered in blood, silent beside the village gate. The little rescued girl suddenly broke free from her mother's arms and ran back toward her. "She carried me the whole way," the child said proudly. The village went quiet. The town elder stepped forward slowly, suspicion twisting across his face. Then one of the rescued prisoners looked directly at the orc woman and went pale. "I know her." The crowd stiffened instantly. The prisoner's voice trembled. "That's a widow of Black Hollow." Fear spread through the villages like fire through dry grass. The name meant something here. Older hunters lowered their eyes. One guard muttered a prayer under his breath. The blacksmith finally spoke. "What does that mean?" Nobody answered immediately. Then an old soldier near the well swallowed hard. "She commanded the siege that broke the northern kingdoms." The wind seemed colder after that. The blacksmith turned toward her slowly. She never denied it, never defended herself. Her silence confirmed everything. The widow of Black Hollow, a war figure whispered about beside campfires for years. The woman standing inside his home had once terrified entire armies. But before anyone could speak again, a new sound rolled across the valley. Horns. Not hunting horns. War horns. Every head turned toward the distant forest road. Dark shapes emerged through the falling snow. Horsemen. Dozens of them. Black banners twisted in the storm wind while armored riders advanced toward Thornwall in perfect formation. Mercenaries. Professional ones. The village instantly panicked. People dragged children indoors while guards scrambled toward the walls. The town elders stumbled backward, suddenly pale beneath the torchlight. At the front of the approaching riders rode a man wearing a wolf fur cloak over black armor scarred by countless battles. His horse stopped beyond arrow range. Then the rider removed his helmet slowly. One long scar crossed his face from forehead to throat. And when he looked toward the orc woman, he smiled, not kindly, like a hunter finally finding wounded prey. "The widow lives," he called across the snow. The orc woman's hand tightened around her blade. The blacksmith noticed something then. For the first time since meeting her, she looked tired. Not physically, emotionally, like the past had finally caught her. The scarred rider raised a sealed royal document high enough for everyone to see. "By order of the Southern Crown," he shouted, "surrender the orc commander and your village survives the night." Silence swallowed Thornwall completely. Snow drifted between them. Then the town elder slowly turned toward the blacksmith's house and pointed. Nobody in Thornwall slept that night. The village burned in silence. Not fully, not yet, but enough. Enough for smoke to crawl across the snow-covered rooftops while terrified families hid behind locked doors listening to mercenaries marching beyond the walls. Torches flickered through the storm like red eyes circling wounded prey. And at the center of it all, the blacksmith stood inside his forge beside the orc woman, while molten iron glowed behind him like trapped sunlight. "You should leave," she said quietly. Outside, another impact slammed against the village gate. The blacksmith kept hammering metal across the anvil without looking up. "If I wanted easy choices," he muttered, "I would have left this village years ago." The orc woman watched him in silence. That answer hit her harder than the war horns outside, because men had followed her before. Kings, soldiers, clan leaders, but never knowing the cost. This man knew exactly what protecting her meant, and stayed anyway. A sudden scream ripped through the village. The attack had started. Mercenaries poured through Thornwall's western barricade beneath black banners snapping violently in the wind. Villagers scattered through icy streets while arrows ignited rooftops one after another. The blacksmith grabbed a hammer still glowing orange from a forge. Back in trance, he ordered nearby families, "Move!" For the first time in years, people actually listened to him. The orc woman stepped into the snowfall beside him, blade drawn slowly while firelight danced across her scarred armor. Then she saw the mercenary captain approaching through the smoke. Wolf fur cloak, scarred face, calm eyes, like he already knew how the night would end. "You still protect humans," he called out, "after what they did to you." The orc woman's jaw tightened. The blacksmith looked between them. "You know him." A bitter smile crossed the captain's face. "I helped train her." Everything seemed to stop for half a heartbeat, even the wind. The captain slowly dismounted while mercenaries surrounded the forge from every direction. "She was supposed to lead the northern clans into a new age," he continued. "Then she ruined everything for starving villages and frightened children." The orc woman's grip tightened around her sword. "You slaughtered civilians. We ended a war." The captain's voice never rose. That made him worse. The blacksmith suddenly understood something terrifying. The stories about Black Hollow were true, but incomplete. The orc woman had not become feared because she enjoyed violence. She became feared because she refused it when nobody else would. Steel clashed nearby as villagers fought desperately through the streets. The mercenary captain glanced toward the chaos almost casually. "Your clan sold you for peace treaties," he said softly. "The humans feared you. The orcs feared your influence. Everyone agreed your death solved problems." The words landed like blades. The orc woman stood completely still. Years of betrayal moved behind her eyes all at once. Everything she sacrificed, everything she protected, it had never mattered. A burning rooftop suddenly collapsed nearby, showering sparks across the snow. The mercenaries advanced instantly. The fight exploded across the forge yard. The blacksmith swung first. His hammer crushed into a soldier's shoulder hard enough to throw the man backward into the furnace stones. Another attacker rushed him with a spear, but years of hauling iron had built strength deeper than appearance. The blacksmith caught the shaft mid-strike and drove molten steel directly into the attacker's face. Beside him, the orc woman fought like a storm, finally losing patience. Fast, precise, terrifying, but something had changed. There was pain in her movements now, not physical pain. The captain's words had cut deeper than any blade. More mercenaries flooded toward the forge. Too many. The blacksmith grabbed her arm suddenly. "Look at me." She froze briefly. Snow melted against the skin while fire reflected inside exhausted eyes. "You fed strangers during war," he said. "You protected people who hated you." Another explosion shook the street nearby, but the blacksmith never broke eye contact. That isn't weakness. For the first time all night, the orc woman looked like she might break. Then the forge doors burst inward. The mercenary captain entered through smoke and sparks while flames climbed the walls behind him. "You always needed someone to believe in," he said coldly. The blacksmith stepped forward instead. "No," he answered. She needed someone to stay. The final battle began there, inside the forge. The blacksmith kicked over barrels of coal while the orc woman shattered support chains holding molten iron above the furnace pits. Burning metal flooded across the stone floor like liquid fire, forcing mercenaries backward into narrow kill zones. Screams echoed everywhere. Smoke blinded archers. Collapsing beams split enemy forces apart. The forge itself became a weapon. The captain fought through it anyway. He moved like the orc woman did. Calculated. Merciless. Their blades crashed together beside rivers of molten steel, while sparks exploded into the darkness around them. Every strike carried years of history. Neither fully spoke aloud. Teacher against student. Survivor against survivor. Then the captain whispered something only she could hear. And for a second, the orc woman hesitated. That hesitation nearly killed her. The captain's blade cut across her side while villagers screamed outside the forge walls. The blacksmith roared and slammed his hammer into the captain's ribs hard enough to crack armor apart. The mercenary staggered backward directly beside the overflowing furnace trench. Still smiling, blood ran from his mouth as he looked toward the orc woman one final time. "You survived Black Hollow," he rasped, "but you cannot survive what comes next." Then he fell backward into the fire. Silence crashed over the forge. Only flames remained. The blacksmith turned toward the shattered doorway slowly, and his blood ran cold. Far beyond Thornwall, hundreds of torchlights were moving through the mountains.